I grew up in a town that forgot how to laugh. When the music came back one night, we all knew something had returned with it. I saw the red coat through the fog, standing where no one should have been. Since then, I've learned, some laughter never dies. Greetings, every shadow hides a story. Welcome. Under the bed. This happened in Hillswood, a sawmill town tucked between two cold rivers, 3 hours from the state capital. Back then it was October 1987, the year the mill cut hours and the carnival still came every fall. My name is Brian, I'm 50 now, but I was 13 when our town stopped laughing. If you drive in from the north, the first thing you see is the water tower with Hillswood hand-painted on its belly and a football field that never quite drains. That's where I first saw him in daylight, the clown in a red coat. His name was Marvin Green. He wasn't famous. He wasn't even good. He'd worked small tents for small money, juggling dull knives, making balloon dogs that always looked like snakes, pulling coins from kids' ears with hands the color of wood glue. He'd set up in front of our school at dismissal, a quiet, weary man in grease paint, trying to make the last bus wait with one more gag. He had a habit of drawing chalk smiles on the curb. "Leave one behind," he would say, "so the street remembers." For a while, we let him try. Parents nodded. Teachers pretended not to see. Then the tent fell. It was a Saturday afternoon at the fairgrounds by the grain silos. A wind came down off the river, the kind of sudden inland gust that turns popcorn into confetti. The main pole groaned, canvas snapped, and a seam tore loose like a sail. People panicked. In the chaos a child, everyone swore it was quick, didn't get up. There were sirens, a stretcher, a blanket. No one told jokes while the pastor said a prayer into the wind. Marvin stood off to the side with his red coat clamped at the throat, the white of his face streaking in the rain, as if the town had washed half of him away. After that, Hillswood decided quietly. We didn't vote. We did not speak poorly of him, not out loud. We just stopped meeting his eyes. The principal asked him not to perform at dismissal for a time. The grocer said the store was closing early when he came in. He moved from the trailer court by the silos to a rented room above the barber where the neon open buzzed even when it wasn't. Each day there were fewer chalk smiles on the curb. Nights grew longer. You could smell creosote where the railroad ties bled after rain. When I think of that month, I hear boots on wet leaves and my mother's voice behind the screen door telling me not to be out after dark. People said they'd seen Marvin on Willow Street after midnight, not doing anything, just standing by the playground fence with his hands through the links, the red coat turning black in the shadows, watching the swings move on their own. It was a small town. Rumors start as whispers and end as landmarks. I saw him one night. I woke because the house made that settling sound, wood exhaling, and because the neighborhood had gone so quiet my ears reached for a noise that wasn't there. Our clock said 12:41. The street light pooled honey on the asphalt. I pulled the curtain with 2 fingers and found the red coat across the road beside the school hedge. He didn't move. He could have been a cutout from a bad poster. The face was pale, not bright like paint, more like someone who'd been sick a long time. He raised a hand, not a wave, exactly. A slow lift. I let the curtain fall, felt the fabric brush my nose, and stood there waiting for my heart to learn a smaller rhythm. At school the next day I told Jason in a voice I wanted to sound casual. He said other kids had heard something too, not music, not words, but a sound like a joke about to happen. There were rumors that Marvin had gone back to the fairgrounds alone, practicing under the half-collapsed canvas. There were also stories he had packed up and left on a truck that never stopped, that he had a sister in Duluth, that he slept in the old ticket shed with a kerosene heater and a deck of marked cards he never used. Truth gets thin when no one wants to touch it. One afternoon I found a chalk smile on the curb outside the barber. It was smaller than the ones from summer, drawn in a careful hand that barely pressed the grit. For a moment I almost stepped on it just to make it end. Instead I walked around, the way you go around a grave. A week later, the barber locked his door at dusk. My father slid a chair under our back doorknob just to be safe. No one said we were afraid of a clown. We were afraid of the space jokes leave behind when they fail. And we were afraid of what follows silence once the town has chosen it. The last time I saw Marvin, he was crossing the school lot at twilight. A breeze tugged the red coat like a flag losing its color. He stopped near the chalk line for kickball, looked down for a long breath, then looked up at the windows where the teacher had taped paper pumpkins that turned gray when the sun went. He touched 2 fingers to his lips and pressed them to the glass as if he were sealing something there. Then he walked the long way toward the fairgrounds, not turning, not hurrying, like a man going to apologize to a place instead of a person. That night, from somewhere beyond the silos, I heard a laugh. Not loud. Not bright. Just the shape of a laugh without the warmth. It came once, then once again, thinner, as if the air itself had tried to remember how and failed. I lay in bed with the blanket over my ears and counted my breaths until they matched the clock. In the morning there was dew on the grass and a smudge of chalk beneath the school sign like a mouth someone had wiped away with a thumb. We told ourselves it would pass. We told ourselves the fall would turn to snow and the tent would rot and the red coat would hang in some other county. We told ourselves we were only hearing things. For a time, that worked. It worked until the night the music started. The first winter wind hit Hillswood early that year. The river mist began to hang heavier, swallowing the streetlights until they looked like weak candles behind glass. Everyone said the town was quieter than usual, but no one said why. The laughter had stopped, and something colder had taken its place. It had been 3 weeks since Marvin Green disappeared. The police said he'd probably gone north with one of the traveling fairs, but they never showed a ticket or a witness. Most of us thought he just walked into the woods and never came back. The old fairground by the silos stayed abandoned, canvas torn, ticket shed leaning like a drunk. Still, at night, people claimed to see a faint red shape moving through the fog near the field. I was 13 and pretending not to care, but I did. Every kid in town did. You couldn't walk home after sunset without looking over your shoulder. People started locking up earlier. By the time the 10 p.m. siren blew from the volunteer firehouse, Hillswood was already dead quiet. Then one night, the quiet ended. It was a Tuesday, around midnight. I woke because of the music. Soft, distant, familiar, the sound of a hand-cranked organ, the same tune Marvin used to play at the fair. The melody was uneven, as if the machine had rusted and every note struggled to escape. It came from the square, 3 blocks from my window. At first, I thought I was dreaming. But the dogs knew better. Every hound on our street began to howl, one by one, until it sounded like the whole town was begging the night to stop. I pushed the curtain aside and saw shapes moving, neighbors at their windows, faces pale behind the glass. Nobody dared to go outside. The next morning, I biked to school early. On Main Street, right by the bakery, someone had drawn a smile in white chalk. It wasn't like the ones Marvin used to make for the kids. This one was crooked, stretched too far, with faint fingerprints smudged across the pavement as if someone had pressed their hand into it before walking away. There was another near the post office. And one more by the church steps. By noon, everyone in Hillswood had heard. Just a prank, the sheriff said. Probably teenagers. But even he didn't sound convinced. He ordered the streets washed, but by nightfall, the smiles came back, this time on front porches, near doors, always facing inward, as if whoever made them wanted to be invited inside. That evening, my father nailed the back door shut. My mother slid a chair under the knob. When I asked why, she didn't answer. She just kept looking toward the window. I remember her voice, low and tight, "If you hear anything tonight, don't move." The second night was worse. The same tune played again, louder, closer. It wound its way through the dark like a slow heartbeat. Then came the laughter. It wasn't children's laughter this time, it was deeper, slower, like someone trying to remember how people used to sound when they were happy. The kind of laugh that doesn't reach the eyes. The power flickered across the street. I saw Mrs. Turner's porch light flash, then go dark. She screamed once. By the time my father opened the door, there was no sound at all. In the morning, Her front door was wide open. The police said she must have forgotten to close it, but everyone in town knew Mrs. Turner checked every lock twice. 3 more houses had chalk smiles by dawn. People started leaving town, some quietly, some without packing. The mayor called it a wave of panic. The newspaper printed one short column, "Strange vandalism continues." That was all. But we knew. We all knew. The laughter that used to fill the square had turned into something else. Something older. Something waiting. On the 3rd night, the music played again. This time, it didn't come from the square. It came from the edge of town, near the fairground. I remember the wind carrying it up the hill to our street, the tune slow and broken, notes skipping like a voice stuttering through tears. My father stood by the window with a hammer in one hand. My mother prayed quietly. I sat on the stairs, watching their faces in the faint light, and realized none of us had blinked for almost a minute. When the music finally stopped, the silence felt wrong, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Then the laughter came one last time, faint, from far away, but clear enough that every dog in Hillswood whimpered. The next morning, the sheriff's car was parked in front of the school. Someone had painted a single white smile on its hood. No one saw who did it. That night, my father didn't wait for the siren. He moved the dresser in front of the door and told me to sleep in the hallway. He said, "If you hear it again, don't open your eyes." I didn't sleep. None of us did. That was the night Hillswood stopped pretending. By the time November came, Hillswood felt hollow. People still went to work, but the rhythm was gone. You could walk down Main Street at noon and hear your own footsteps echo off the shop windows. The sheriff's car was parked in the same spot every day, but no one saw him inside. He had started sleeping there, or so they said. The chalk smiles kept appearing, thin and perfect, like they'd been traced by a hand that didn't shake. At the school, the teachers stopped talking about it. They told us to focus on our lessons, to ignore the stories, but even the youngest kids flinched when the hallway clock clicked. Everyone avoided the windows after dark. I remember the smell of dust and floor wax, the way the old heaters groaned through the cold mornings. Every sound seemed louder now, sharper, like the walls were listening. 3 weeks after the last music, the principal decided to hold a spirit day to calm people down. He said it would help the children feel normal again. There were balloons in the gym, paper decorations on the walls, and someone brought an old box of cassette tapes from the storage closet for background music. Most were blank, or recorded over with school events from years ago. One of the teachers found one with a piece of red tape across the label that read simply "Smiles." She thought it was from the old carnival. They played it halfway through the morning. At first it was just static, a hum like wind over a wire. Then a man's voice came in, soft, careful, almost whispering a rhyme. "Round and round the people go, nobody laughs, nobody knows." Then came laughter, not a burst of it, but a single low chuckle, stretched too long. The gym went silent. The tape kept playing, but no one moved to stop it. It wasn't just noise. The sound seemed to come from the corners of the room, not from the speaker. I could feel it pressing in my ears like the air had thickened. The teacher hit stop. The player clicked. But the laugh didn't stop. It rolled through the gym like it was bouncing off the floor, from one wall to the next. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it ended. The cassette was ejected halfway, like someone invisible had pressed the button. The lights flickered. After that, no one spoke about the tape. The principal locked it in his office. By the end of the week, he'd driven out of town and never came back. That Friday night, Jason and I decided to see the fairgrounds for ourselves. We told each other it was to prove nothing was there, but deep down we both wanted to know what the grown-ups were too afraid to say out loud. We took our bikes and flashlights and followed the road behind the silos. The field was soaked with fog. The old tent poles still jutted from the ground like bones. The air smelled of rust and something faintly sweet, like burnt sugar. The ticket shed's door hung open. Inside, everything was covered in gray dust except for a small trail of footprints, child-sized, bare, leading from the door toward the center of the tent ruins. We followed them. They ended abruptly, right in the middle of a blackened patch of earth. My light flickered over something buried in the dirt, a piece of red fabric, stiff and cracked with age. I reached down to touch it. It was cold, colder than the air around it. Then I heard it, the music box. A slow, broken tune, twisting through the fog. Jason turned pale. "That's him," he whispered. But it wasn't coming from the tent, it was behind us. We ran, stumbling through the mud. The fog thinned near the fence, and for a second I saw something through it, a shape in a red coat, standing perfectly still. The head tilted slightly as if watching us leave. We didn't tell anyone. No one would have believed us anyway. But the next morning, the sheriff found Jason's bike at the edge of the field. No footprints, no struggle, just his flashlight, still on, shining toward the woods. The sheriff said he must have gotten lost and wandered off. The search lasted 3 days. They found nothing. The night after they called it off, the laughter came back. It started near the river and drifted through town like wind chimes made of breath. You could hear it in the drains, in the alley behind the diner, in the still spaces between one heartbeat and the next. People packed what they could and left. Those who stayed began to board up windows. My father nailed the crossbars himself, not saying a word. My mother burned the last of Marvin's old flyers in the fireplace, but the paper wouldn't blacken, it just curled and smoked. For 3 nights, the laughter came and went. On the 4th, silence. The kind that feels heavier than sound. I thought it was over until I walked past the school on my way home from the store. On the side door, someone had drawn another smile. But this one wasn't in chalk. It was painted in red. By December, Hillswood was no longer a town. It was a place where people existed, but no one truly lived. Half the houses stood empty. The grocery store closed at noon. You could hear the church bell ring every evening, though no one ever pulled the rope. The paper stopped printing after the editor drove out one morning and never returned. The only thing that didn't stop was the wind, it scraped against the boarded windows like fingernails. The sheriff's car was still parked by the school. Its tires were half flat now, frost gathering on the windshield. No one saw him after the search for Jason ended. Some said he went into the woods and kept walking until the laughter stopped following him. Others said he'd seen something near the fairground that broke him. Hillswood had started speaking in rumors instead of sentences. I stayed because my parents refused to leave. "It's our home," my father said. "It's just fear." But fear had a sound in Hillswood now, like wheels turning in the dark when no one's there to push them. One morning, I went to check the mail. On the front step, there was a piece of paper folded twice. No name, no writing, just a drawing, a child's sketch of a face with a wide red smile. The edges were damp, as if it had been left in dew. I showed it to my mother. She stared at it for a long time before burning it over the sink. The smoke smelled like oil paint, not paper. That same night, I heard tapping on the window. 3 slow knocks, a pause, then 2 more. I thought it was the wind until I heard breathing on the other side of the glass, steady, human, close. I turned on the lamp. There, behind the fogged pane, was a face. White makeup, hollow eyes, and a drawn red smile that stopped just short of the ears. It wasn't grinning. It was studying me. The skin around the eyes was gray, almost translucent, and the lips looked like they'd been painted with something thick that glistened in the light. I froze. The face didn't move. Then, slowly, one hand lifted into view and pressed against the glass. The fingers were small, almost like a child's. I stumbled back, hit the wall, and yelled for my father. By the time he ran into the room, the window was empty. Outside, snow was falling, soft and soundless. But on the glass, there was still the print of that hand, a perfect outline in white frost. The next morning, the mark was gone, but there was something new on the street. Every window facing Main Road had a single chalk smile drawn beneath it. All identical. All the same height from the ground. My father went to the police station, but it was empty. Papers scattered across the floor, the radio hissing static. The only thing on the desk was a half-burned cassette tape and a photo of the missing boy, Jason. Someone had drawn a small red circle around his face. That evening, I found another drawing on our porch, a sketch of the school. In the top window was a tiny figure wearing a red coat. My mother began to cry quietly at the table. My father said nothing. He just picked up his hammer and started nailing every window shut. That night, we slept in the living room. The air felt wrong, too still, like the house was holding its breath with us. Around midnight, a sound came from outside, the soft squeak of rubber wheels. Then the faint click of metal. My father grabbed the flashlight and opened the curtain. In the middle of the road stood an old cart, the kind used for carnival games, its paint peeled away. A music box rested on top, spinning slowly. The crank moved on its own. The melody was broken, same as always, but this time there were whispers between the notes. Words too quiet to understand, but the rhythm was unmistakable, like someone telling a joke with no punchline. My mother whispered that she saw someone standing by the hedges. I looked and caught a glimpse of red fabric moving just beyond the light's reach. When my father swung the beam toward it, the figure was gone, but the cart kept playing until the key wound down on its own. At dawn, we went outside. The snow around the cart was untouched. No footprints, no drag marks. Only one thing left behind, a small, white card tucked under the wheel. On it was a single word, written in a shaky hand, remember. That was the morning my father decided to leave. He packed our things into the truck and told us we were heading to his brother's farm 2 towns over. We loaded what we could, and as we were leaving, I looked back at our house. In my bedroom window, behind the curtain I'd closed the night before, was a face. Pale, painted, unmoving. Watching us drive away. We didn't stop until the road curved past the river. My mother refused to look behind her, but I did. And I swear, just for a second, I saw the red coat standing in the fog at the edge of town, one hand raised in a slow, silent wave. That was the last time I saw Hillswood. We never made it to my uncle's farm. The truck broke down just past the old bridge, 12 miles from Hillswood. My father said it was the radiator, but when he opened the hood, there wasn't a drop of fluid left. It was as if the truck had been running on air. He decided we'd stay one night in a roadside cabin before finding a tow in the morning. It was late, the forest already wrapped in fog, and none of us wanted to go back. The cabin smelled of damp wood and kerosene. My mother sat by the window, her hands shaking as she tried to light a lamp. My father paced. He didn't want to admit it, but I could see it in his face. He thought we were being followed. He checked the locks twice, then once more, sliding a chair under the door handle like he'd done at home. Outside, the woods were quiet, too quiet. No crickets, no wind, just the slow creak of the trees as if something heavy leaned against them. We ate cold beans from a can and tried not to talk. The silence felt alive. Around midnight, the lamp flickered once, then again, and went out. My father cursed softly, reached for the flashlight, and that's when we heard it, the sound that every person from Hillswood had learned to dread. Music. Faint, distant, carried by the wind. The same melody that used to echo across the fairground, played now on something broken and old. The tune wavered, slowed, and then sped up again, like someone trying to crank it by hand. My mother started whispering prayers. My father grabbed the flashlight and went to the window. The light caught only fog. Nothing moved. Then came the laugh. It was close this time, just outside the cabin. Not the giggle of a performer, but the drawn-out breath of someone trying to remember joy. It came in short bursts, uneven, followed by a rasping wheeze, as if whoever was laughing had forgotten how. My father shouted for them to leave. The sound stopped. He waited, holding the flashlight to the window, and for a long moment, everything was still. Then, slowly, from the fog, a red shape began to form. A coat. A gloved hand brushing along the window frame. And then the face. White. Empty. The same chalk smile, only larger now, cracked at the edges like old paint. Two dark eyes fixed on us through the glass. My mother screamed. My father fired the rifle he kept behind the seat, the noise shattering the night. When the smoke cleared, the window was empty, but there was a hole in the glass, and outside, no blood. Only the faint sound of something dragging through the leaves. We packed what we could before sunrise and started walking toward the next town. The road was long and gray, lined with frost-bitten trees. By mid-morning, a highway patrol car stopped to help. The officer asked where we were coming from. When my father said Hillswood, the man froze. He didn't write anything down. He just said, quietly, "There is no Hillswood. Not anymore." He drove us to a nearby station, gave us water, and told us to rest. When my father insisted he'd left his job, his house, and everything behind, the officer shook his head. He said the whole area had been condemned after a fire 20 years ago, the fairground, the school, everything. He said nobody lived there. I told him he was wrong. I told him I'd been there, that I'd seen the faces, heard the music, buried my own childhood there. He looked at me for a long moment and said, "Kid, that place burned down in '87. That night they put us in a motel." My parents didn't speak. I couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I went to the bathroom and caught my reflection in the mirror. At first, I thought I was seeing my own breath, but when I leaned closer, I realized there was something on the glass, drawn faintly in the condensation. A smile. Thin. Crooked. Exactly like the ones from the sidewalks back home. I wiped it away, but it came back. The same arc, the same tilt. Then I noticed something else, the sound. A soft, steady whirring, like a tape reel turning. It was coming from the room next door. I pressed my ear to the wall. The melody played faintly through it, the same tune from the fairground, looping endlessly. I ran to wake my father, but he was already sitting upright, staring at the window. The curtains moved though there was no wind. Outside, in the parking lot, stood an old carnival cart. Its paint peeled, its wheels sunken into the dirt. The crank on the side turned slowly on its own. And next to it, half in shadow, was a man in a red coat. The officer found the cabin empty the next morning. The door was locked from the inside. The truck, still by the bridge, showed no signs of damage. The only thing they discovered down by the river was a small wooden box, warped by water. Inside it was a tape labeled Smiles. When they played it, there was no music, only the faint hum of static and, near the end, a voice. Mine. Younger. Saying, "Round and round the people go, nobody laughs, nobody knows." They say no one's lived in Hillswood for decades now. The town's name doesn't appear on modern maps. But sometimes, when the fog rolls down the valley, people driving that stretch of road claim they hear faint carnival music under the wind. I've never gone back. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wake to the sound of soft laughter coming from the corner of my room. It always stops when I open my eyes. And on the wall above my bed, drawn in pale white chalk, there's a smile that no one else can see. The town stopped laughing long ago. But something out there never did.